Welcome back to another episode of Civic Affairs. And wow, I almost called you Randy. Andy, it's our first episode since the election.
Yes,
How
good
exciting.
to be with you, Riley.
Yeah.
It's over, it's done with.
So we were both here, well not here, but involved in the election coverage on last Monday. You were down at City Hall.
Right.
I was down here at the desk. Now, what are your thoughts? I'm going to just say it. Some of your predictions were wrong.
They were. I've been doing this for a long time, and you just can't
So you were
predict
surprised?
election in some ways.
Yeah.
But it's good. I was devastated by the thought of not having any female on council, and I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah, and we got some powerhouse females on council.
We did. Donna Hilsinger,
Lisa Vezzo-Allen,
oh, definitely.
and of course Sandra Hollingsworth.
Right.
So it's really great to see those faces. I think it's great to see those faces on council. I think too about some of the young blood that didn't get in, that we haven't seen the last of them, and that they'll be back. Like Sarah McCleary, I can see running again in the future, and even Winona Hutchinson. You know,
That's
she brought a lot of issues to the forefront and really took a head-on approach to the whole.
She had a lot of people were noticing
Yeah.
her name, and for a first-time candidate, that's excellent.
So it was really great to see. One thing I was really surprised about, though, was Dawn Mitchell.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yeah.
And name recognition means something in
It
this
does.
community.
Now, tonight we're going to be speaking with Mayor Christian Provenzano, who will be entering his second term
Right.
as mayor. Rick Niro, who has been a city councillor for over 20 years, but not consecutively.
No, that's right. He
and-
started in the late 80s.
Yeah, and then he took a break and then
Right.
came back. So he was reelected to Ward 4. And then we are also going to be speaking with Josh Ingram, who is the general manager of the Downtown Association, about his kind of reflection on the last 4 years and where he hopes to see this new council take the downtown revitalization.
I'm
in the
really
next
impressed
4.
with him because he's
put in
done a lot
of
in
good work
4
downtown.
years.
Oh,
Yeah,
he sure
yeah.
has. And you know what? In his ward, by his ward I mean the downtown's ward, they have 2 new councillors, right?
Right.
So that could mean some new things. They have Luke Dufour and Lisa Vezzo-Allen. Previously it was in Ward 2. They had Lou Turco and, was it Rick Niro?
No, in Ward 2 it was,
Oh, he was in Ward 4.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was,
Sandra Hollingsworth.
right.
Susan Myers?
Right,
Okay, yeah, see the
But
the
Ward
boundaries.
4 was part of the downtown.
yeah.
It's confusing.
It is confusing. So this could be a big 4 years for them with 2 new councillors kind of
Definitely.
leading.
I think the downtown is on the radar of a lot of councilors.
Absolutely, and I definitely think it's on the radar of the 2 new
Yes,
candidates. They've
I
spent
have
a lot
talked
of their
to both of them,
yeah.
and it is. And that's the beauty of this new setup, that newbies have 5 votes. Once they get up and running, it's going to be an interesting dynamic, because from the new council, all they need is 6 votes to pass things. So
Right.
they have 5, all they need is 1. So
No,
it'll
it's
be
true.
interesting to see how things go.
Now, what are your thoughts on the new dynamic in council? Because we've seen now, and there was not a total turnover. We do have some incumbent city politicians in power, but like Frank Fata, Ozzie Grandinetti, Lou Turco, they all lost their seats on council.
Well, Frank Fata, I think, was talking about term limits, and he was going for a third term.
After
and
saying-
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I've been here 28 years, and very few elections do you see a turnover of 5
that
to
rate.
7. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was not expecting 5. When 2 incumbents get, defeated, then something's gone wrong, kind of thing.
And what are your thoughts on the Lou Turco? Because that raised a lot of, I don't want to say red flags, but there was a lot of contention around this idea of plunking, which I know you're going to talk
Right.
about a little bit later with
Yeah,
Councillor
with
Niro.
Rick, yeah.
But was it that kind of, I don't want to say ruined, but lost him the campaign? Or was it just the 2 new faces that people wanted to change?
You really had dynamic faces in Lisa Vezzo-Allen and Luke Dufour. Luke Dufour had the advantage on Lou Turco because he had seen both ends of the new Ward 2. He had
He's put in
campaigned
the
in the
work.
by-election, and he had Ward 4 in 2014. So he had seen both ends of the ward, and he had an advantage. But I think the incumbents need to show up to the debates. The fact that Lou Turco didn't show up to the debates, and it was astounding. I saw some of the candidates' flyers in Ward 2. They were literally attacking Lou Turco,
Yeah.
which I've never seen
Yeah,
in
it was
any
an
election.
interesting race in
Oh, it
in Ward
was,
2.
yeah.
And then we saw Judy Huppanen, which we don't see very often. The incumbents, she came last in the voting there.
That's that I predicted that Judy wouldn't win,
But I didn't expect
come
her to.
last.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was an interesting race, and thank you all for staying with us during that exciting
You've got the
time.
mayor coming up
Yeah,
live?
so we have Mayor Christian Provenzano coming up next, followed by Rick Niro, and we will close off our evening with Josh Ingram. So stay tuned on Civic Affairs with Riley Smith and Andy Martins. We'll be right back with Christian Provenzano after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Civic Affairs. I'm here with Mayor Christian Provenzano. Christian, how's it going today?
Very well. Good evening.
Good evening. Congratulations on your successful bid for a second term as our mayor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So, this was a little bit of a heated election campaign. Yeah, I know you spoke a little bit on election night about the relationship with the chamber and with Rory Ring moving forward, but it's been a week, so I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about that. Do you have any kind of final reflection or concerns about, you know, the relationship with the chamber moving forward? Or is it water under the bridge?
No, listen. I don't have any concerns. I've met with Carlos Spadafora, who's the acting chair of the chamber. I've known him for a long time. We go way back, and you know what? I have a ton of relationships with chamber board members.
Right.
And I'm a chamber member, so I'm an active member of the chamber. So you know, I made it clear to Carlo that I was happy to work with him, the chamber board. I think that there's a lot to be learned in the last few years. I think that this council, this past 4 years, we had a really good story to tell on taxes, and I don't think we told it to the degree that we could have told it. I think we could have told it better.
Okay.
And you know, I think the chamber became very political. I mean, I think I could say that now.
Yeah.
You had the chamber, the chamber's main employee, Mr. Ring ran. You had the chamber board run, and the chamber for years has been, you know, going on and on and on about industrial taxes. And so I really think it was kind of single note. Like it was, as a chamber member, I was like, they're just talking about the same thing, and they're not really telling the whole story when they're talking about that. But I frankly think that this election moves us beyond that.
Right.
Because you had those two leaders in the chamber talk about that issue, mainly the mayoral candidate, talked about the issue the whole campaign.
Yeah.
And he talked about it, and he talked about it, and he talked about it. And it actually gave me the opportunity to talk about the real tax story and the actual tax story of the last 4 years. And you know, my campaign was really successful, and I was returned for a second term. So I feel very much like those issues are behind us now.
They're settled based on this.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And so what I said to Carlo is, look, you know, I have nothing but affection in my heart for the community, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the business community and what it contributes to our community at large. And I'm happy to work with the chamber, who represents, I think, about 25% of our business community,
Right.
and the rest of our business community. So I'm going to work well with Carlo on a going forward basis. The chamber will have its own, you know, discussions about how it moves forward and what it
Right.
decides to focus on. But those are chamber discussions, and they don't involve me.
And I think you kind of led me right to my next question, because a point of contention in this election was taxes. You know, Rory Ring essentially based his campaign on that. His slogan was more jobs, lower taxes. But evidently, the people have spoken, and voting in incumbents suggests that this was not as pressing an issue as some of the candidates, both council and mayoral, suggested. But based on what you've heard, you're saying moving forward that, pardon me, the industrial taxes aren't an issue, and that the last 4 years have been good.
So listen, let's separate these things out, though.
Okay.
So there's three broad classes of taxes. There's residential taxes, commercial taxes, and industrial taxes. I think spending and taxes are always an issue. They are something that mayor and council always have to be mindful about. But I think where it wasn't an issue this time is that I don't think people believe that this mayor, me, and this city council weren't mindful of them.
Right.
We cut spending. We decreased city spending. We made some tough decisions to get out of some services that we were in. So this wasn't a tax and spend council. So that was, I think, where Mr. Ring's campaign didn't find any room and didn't really find a landing pad, is that it wasn't based in fact or truth.
Right.
So, But we always, it's factual and truthful to say that taxes are important and spending is important. We have to be conscientious and mindful of taking people's tax dollars. But on the taxes side, we brought down all of our tax rates, but our industrial tax rate. But the reason why the industrial tax rate jumped had nothing to do with decisions mayor or council made. It had to do with assessment.
Right.
And it had to do with a major drop in assessment to a major industrial taxpayer. So when you look at how we dealt with that, in the circumstances, we dealt with that very capably and as best we could.
With the resources you had available.
With the resources we had available at the time. But let's be clear, it's absolutely something that we have to address, but we've acknowledged that, like publicly acknowledged that we have to work on and address these things. 2016, my office put out a research paper on the importance for tax fairness. And we have passed a tax fairness policy and a long-term tax policy to lead to tax fairness. So these are live issues that the last mayor and council have dealt with and that I would expect this coming council to deal with. This coming council is going to have to be sensitive to costs. We're doing what we can to make living in our community as affordable as possible, but we have very few resources to do that. So what we have to make sure we do a better job of this term is talking to the community at large about what we're doing to improve the business climate and what we're doing to make sure that people's day-to-day costs are not going up.
Are realistic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back here with Mayor Christian Provenzano to talk a little bit more about his hopes for the next 4 years. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Civic Affairs. Welcome back to Civic Affairs. We're here with Christian Provenzano. So we talked a little bit about taxes, about the relationship with the commerce and how we're moving forward from that. Now, something you mentioned in an interview with Luann here last week was about that the last 4 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is how I interpret it, were a lot of prep work to laying the groundwork for a lot of action that needs to be taken in the next 4. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. I think there was a lot of action in the last 4, but I think what I was saying is that there's a lot of building that took place, and we've actually put ourselves in a really good position to do some really substantial things this term, and we've got a lot of the building blocks in place. Like we made a fundamental shift in how we do economic development. We refocused on community development. We put a project team together in Future Sault Ste. Marie that's a really energized group of young professionals that are looking forward and saying, what do we want our community to look like? And we've got a lot of community leaders involved in that and citizens involved in that. So we've done a lot of great work to build, and we're going to continue to action and build over the next 4 years. So I'm excited by it.
So yeah, what I understood was like, a lot of people, they think that so much can be accomplished in 4 years, and it can, but like you've said before, it takes time. It takes a little bit longer than 4 years isn't really that long in the grand scheme of laying down building blocks and then actually creating something out of it.
Yeah, if you think about it in the terms of if you have a small business, you could do a certain number of things in 4 years. If you have a large business, it takes you a little bit longer. But we're talking about a community. And we're talking about really improving a community and improving the infrastructure in the community, and the vitality in the community, and giving people in the community opportunity. So you're talking about changing a community at large, and there's some cultural change that has to take place. There's some human resource change and infrastructure change and development that has to take place. So yeah, these things, frankly, 4 years isn't really enough time to make those substantial changes. At the same time, if you've had 8 years, and you've had 8 years and you've worked hard, you really had an opportunity, in my opinion, in 8 years to make the change you were looking to make. To give it your best go. And if you don't get to where you wanted to go in 8 years, either you should get out of your way to give someone else a chance, right? Or you should get out of the way because you didn't do it.
So term limits.
Yeah. So
which we've talked about before.
Yeah, and I personally believe in term limits. So there's no way to actually implement a term limit, but because I believe in them, I'm going to hold myself to a term limit. And I'm confident that 8 years will be enough time to affect the change I'm looking to affect. And if I wasn't successful in doing that in 8 years, I would certainly get out of the way in any event and let someone else have a chance.
So, with 5 new councillors, do you have maybe not concerns is the right words, but what are your anticipations for council? Like, what do you think the dynamic is going to be like? Do you think there's going to be a big shift from what you've been used to in the last 4 years? Are you looking to veteran councillors to kind of offer, some guidance in that sense?
Well, look, I think it's going to be a very different council. So I do think it's going to be a significant shift from the last 4 years to the next 4 years. I'm excited by the group that was elected. I think there's a great balance between returning councillors and new councillors.
Absolutely.
I haven't done the math on this, but I imagine our demographic our average age has come down a bit. I could be incorrect about that. I haven't actually sat down and thought about it. It just seemed to me by what I've seen, our gender balance is stronger than it was during the last council. And we've got, I think, a really diverse group and a lot of different perspectives.
Some different backgrounds.
Yeah, we have different backgrounds, different perspectives. So I think it's going to take a while for everybody to get used to each other. Part of that's my job.
Right.
And, I take that seriously. But I really think that this group can do some really substantial work. I think it helps that I'm one of the people on council with experience.
Right.
Because I could help some of the new councillors through, learning the ropes and getting up to speed. And, the 5 returning councillors we have are, all really dedicated people that care a lot about the community. And I think they'll all serve as good mentors. So I think it's going to be a good group. I think we're going to have a really productive 4 years. We'll have bumps along the way. I mean,
as to be expected.
Yeah, most groups do, but I'm looking forward to it.
So one of the things that is going to undoubtedly come up at council in one of these first meetings of the new council will probably be about whether or not to opt out of the cannabis legislation. Now, obviously, there's nothing to be said for that until it's debated in council. But can you take us through a little bit of what that process will be like for a new council? What can the residents expect it to kind of look like?
See, I think we're all kind of trying to figure out what this means.
Yeah.
So when marijuana legalization started, the province was going to run one store in Sault Ste. Marie. And the province at the time was going to be like a publicly run, a provincially run store. And the province at the time was working really closely with the city to figure out a place that the city was satisfied the store can go. So when the new government switched and said it's going to be private sector, we weren't quite sure what that meant.
Right.
It could have meant, okay, one private sector store, maybe we'll locate that store in the same place that it was going to be located when the public sector was running it. But that's not the case. So what we have to do is we have to make sure council understands and has the information to understand, here's what it's going to look like if we don't opt out, right? So here's what the province is planning to do, and here's the number of licenses they can issue, and if they issue these number of licenses, here's where the stores can go.
Right.
And here's what it looks like if we opt out.
Right.
Right, so staff is going to be working on a report to essentially educate council and give council the information on what the provincial policies look like. So we're really trying to get a read from the province on that. And get a sense from them on what this is going to look like. How many licenses will they issue to operate these stores? Right. We need to know that kind of information. So we'll make sure council has that in early January. Council will have all that information. All that information will be made public.
Right.
Councils will do their jobs, I'm sure, solicit feedback from their respective wards.
Yeah.
And we'll have a debate. And, from my perspective, anybody in the city of Sault Ste. Marie that is legally allowed to buy marijuana will be able to buy it because the province reserved the right to sell it online.
Right.
So the province is selling it online now. So if you're someone with a computer, you're going to be able to order.
Whether it comes specifically to the SIU or not,
that's right.
They'll still be able to access
it. It will be coming here. Like, I mean, whether or not there's a store here, you can buy marijuana online from your provincial government.
Right.
So, like, it's going to happen, and it's a question of whether or not we would permit a store. From my perspective, we'd have to be careful about prohibiting legal businesses.
Absolutely.
Right? These are legal businesses, and you have to really be careful about prohibiting them. But you also want to make sure when we were dealing with the province, there was discussion about where we'd be comfortable locating it, right? So I think that's a relevant discussion.
Yeah.
Where should this be zoned? Where should they be located?
And what safeguards will be in place
to
regulate them?
I think council will have that discussion, and I don't know where council will land on it. I try not to prejudge these things. I always try and be clear about what I think, and I think I have been on this issue, but we'll have council debate it. Council will have a debate, they'll have a discussion, then they'll ultimately have a vote. And prior to the January date, which is mid to late January, we'll have to either opt out or not. And if we don't opt out, we just need to know what that means.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. I know that's a topic on a lot of people's minds lately. And thank you and congratulations again on your successful bid. So we will be back in the studio just after this break when Andy Martins will be interviewing Ward 4 Councillor Rick Niro. Stay tuned on Civic Affairs.
Welcome back to Civic Affairs. My guest is Rick Niro, the Councillor for Ward 4.
Hi, Andy.
Congratulations on your win.
Thank
again,
you very
Rick.
much.
20 years on council. That's
20 years so far.
That's great stuff. And you kind of split, but it's going to be 24, and you can add to it.
It'll be 24. I started in '88, my first time that I ran, and I decided not to run in the year 2000, and I had a 10-year break. And then in 2010, I started thinking about municipal politics again, and decided I'd give it another shot. And here I am, 2 terms later.
Actually, that was a question I was thinking about asking you. And since we're talking about the time period, how do you compare the councils in the first 12 compared to since 2010, the mayor and councils of the prior time versus today?
I think they were quite the same in the sense that we were all driving for the same results. The early councils progressively got younger, and when I first came on council, I was preaching the same thing, that it's time for younger people to get on council, and I believe I was around 37, I think, at the time, and nothing to that effect has changed today, but we're always striving for the same end result. We were striving for lowering tax increases. We were striving for job diversity and economic diversity. So I think in transparency and those kinds of things in today's world, I think that the most recent council in the last 2 terms, let's say, have come a longer way than those previous councils.
Right. I came to this community in 1990, and one of the first things I saw was Frank Manzo hitting the cane on the table with Joe at the time, and now that remains in my mind 28 years later.
There were, and I sat on those councils, and there were some council members who were quite adamant on their positions, and they made sure that people knew, their constituents knew how they felt and how they were going to push their philosophy forward, if I can put it that way.
One final question, and then we'll move on, about the early days, the early 90s. A lot of people felt that the mayor and council at that time, the zero tax increases hurt the community. But I think that was a different time, and the need was there to try that, at least.
Absolutely. I think that's a very correct statement. Some people will say that hurt us, and I tend that it may have hurt us in the long run. Over the years, are you ever able to catch up for those zero tax increase years that we had? But there were reasons that we had to do that at those times. And I don't think we're the worst for it, but I think that we've gradually caught up and overcome those years that we had the zero tax increases.
Let's move to the election now. What can you tell us about the experience of the past election that we just ended, running when 2 new faces are there? How does that apply? How does your strategy gel seeing 2 new faces there?
Well, my strategy, this was not the first time that I saw 2 new faces. My strategy, this is the 7th time that I ran for municipal council. My strategy has never changed.
Okay. You've got a winning formula.
Whatever that formula is, I believe that there's a difference between people running for the first time and incumbents running, and incumbents are running on a report card. We've been on council, we've worked on council, people have seen us operate, they know how much we put into council. So when we go door to door, they, for the most part, they know who we are, and they know what we've done. When you're a new person coming in, you need to really sell yourself, because you don't have history to show people that, look, this is what I've done, this is how I conduct myself on council, I'm an active member of council. You don't have that. So you have to sell yourself to people when you go door to door. We have to, as incumbents, we have to do the same thing, but we do have some history that could back us up.
in a different way, an easier way, one could say those things, but you're right, an election is a report card, and that's just the way it is. Incumbents have an easier sort of way to get there.
Well, if you are that councillor, if the
Right.
report card shows you the other way, then it's going to work against you as well.
Right, as we've seen, some incumbents were defeated in the past elections. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back with Ward 4 Councillor Rick Niro. We'll be back right after this message. Welcome back to Civic Affairs. Thanks for staying with us. We're back here with Ward 4 Councillor Rick Niro live. An issue came up, Rick, through the campaign, plunking. What are your thoughts on this? Should it be one vote or should it be two votes? Do we really need to have it both ways?
Well, my personal opinion is that it certainly shouldn't be something that should be advertised to voters that, look, you can do one vote.
Right.
Their right is to elect two councillors. My position would be you want to use your two votes. Now, obviously, there are reasons for using one vote. If you certainly don't like any of the people that are running as councillor, but you have one preference, and if you want to make your vote count, and you know that that's how you can do it, then there's nothing wrong with it. But I'm not one that would promote using the one vote.
And we know a certain councillor has done that throughout the years, and I think it's more confusing for the voters than anything else.
Absolutely. During the campaign, I'm sure I'm not the only one. You happen to go to a resident's door and you'll see one of your competitors' candidate's signs on the lawn, and you'll have a conversation with that resident. And you know, normally what I would say is, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, I realize that you're supporting so-and-so, you have your line, but please remember you have two votes and consider me for your second vote.
That's right.
And-
you know,
and-
it's all how you say it to the voters, really,
Sure.
when you're at the
Sure.
door. With the new dynamic of 5 new councillors, Rick, is it possible that transparency, some people think that transparency on council needs to be fine-tuned or tweaked a little bit? I'm thinking in terms of with the new council, you need 6 votes to pass things. Now with 10 councillors, these new people have 5. Could that kind of improve the dynamics a little bit in that area, do you think? Or?
I think the big thing that is coming is our recorded voting on every vote. So anything that we approve, everyone will know.
That's
It'll be
good. I like
completely
that.
transparent
Yeah,
on which way we voted.
Yeah.
Right now, if you want to know how your councillor voted on an issue, and you can call that councillor, if you don't happen to catch how the hand went up, which, you know, when it's recorded and when it's televised, you certainly don't get a shot of the whole council when
Right.
we're voting.
It's hard to do,
And sometimes
yeah.
when we vote on a lot of things that are just administrative cleaning up things, they're very quick votes. And we approve them. There's no discussion. So this will certainly clear that up, and it'll be more transparent that way. But I think as far as transparency, I would certainly like to listen to discussions where we can be more transparent than what we have been, because to me, this is one of the biggest ways we can improve on what we're already doing.
Is this council missing a beat by not having 2 councillors on the agenda setting committee? Is that, how would you like to see that?
I'm kind of mixed on that issue. I'm going to tell you the truth, Andy. I'm mixed. I was on council when we had a member of council
You've seen
on
it
the
both
agenda. I've
ways,
seen
yeah.
it both ways. I don't feel, you know, at a loss because we don't have a member of council on that agenda committee. If this comes up for discussion and it's the will of council to have a councillor on the agenda committee, I don't have a problem with it. I just don't. If we want something on the agenda, there is a procedure to do that. And for the most part, if two councillors have a resolution that they want presented, it'll be on the agenda.
Right, a mover and a seconder.
If you have a mover and a seconder, there's no reason, unless it's something legal that's brought up through that resolution, that the Agenda Review Committee could say, you know what, this just can't be dealt with in open council.
Caucus
Correct.
instead.
Other than that, any normal transactional city business, two councillors, mover and a seconder, it's on the agenda.
One quick question to end the segment with Marchie Bruni as your ward mate. How do you think that dynamic is going to go in the next 4 years?
I think it's going to go very well. I'm looking forward to working with Marchie. We haven't been ward mates, but we sat next to each other these last 4 years, and you know, behind the camera, sometimes we've discussed the issue that's before us. And when I say behind the camera, we're an open council, but you know, questions back and forth for clarity before we take a position on it. But
well, I'm looking forward to it, Rick, because it's going to be a dynamic team, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, no problem. O'Reilly will be back right after this message with Josh Ingram.
Welcome back to Civic Affairs. I'm here with Josh Ingram, the General Manager of the Downtown Association. Now, you guys had a busy summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Followed by a municipal election for new city council.
Yeah.
And you have two new councillors in Ward 2, which primarily is the downtown core. What are your thoughts on this as manager of the Downtown Association?
I'm excited. You know, I don't negate the efforts put in by previous councillors, obviously, but you know, I'm really proud of the community when they come up and they vote, and if they want change, they you know, they advocate for it. And there was obviously kind of a note in that for Ward 2 having two brand new councillors. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm excited. I know the CVs really well of both councillors, and they're really exemplary people. So I'm looking forward to working together with both of them.
Looking forward to working with them.
Yeah.
Now, a topic that came up a lot during this election period specifically, and even before it, was City Council's use of consultants.
Sure.
And one in particular that was used in relation to downtown was the Roger Brooks consulting. Now, can you speak a little bit to the recommendations that were made and what kind of hopes you have moving forward? Because that's something that council's going to have to make a decision on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is the BIA was the spearhead in bringing Roger in.
Right.
But extremely quickly, Tom Vair's office, the deputy CAO, joined forces with us to bring Roger in. It was a joint effort with the city of Sault Ste. Marie. I am the general manager of the BIA, but I also sit as the chair of the downtown development lead for the future SSM project.
Right.
So both those teams have looked to those 99 recommendations, you know, kind of tooth and nail, you know, combed through it.
Right.
So we've identified in the future SSM team 15 priorities out of those 99. And that was selected just by a blind survey. All the members of that team just took it and anonymously, whatever kind of rolled out of the survey is what it was. Yeah, exactly, majority rules. So we're focused on those 15 right now. The BIA is focused on some other ones, but the overall goal is to tackle all 99 one way or another. Now, strategic plans take years to kind of implement. So, so we have our kind of priorities, and we've broken them into short-term, mid-term, long-term, and we're focused on those 15 right now.
So right now it's been kind of narrowed down, and we can expect to see the development of those 15 in the next...
Yeah, the first 5 short-term ones we want to accomplish within 6 months.
Okay.
And I think you've seen the start of that already. If you visited downtown in the summertime, you saw a lot more planters and benches and things like that. Those were real quick wins.
Easy fixes, kind of.
But even behind the scenes stuff, absolutely. But even behind the scenes stuff like having an event. We had more events this
Yeah,
year
absolutely.
than we have in the last 5 years. So like some of those behind the scene processes are really being looked at. We also hope to kind of get some hanging bracket signs for businesses downtown, and that takes some work with city legal and, you know, liability and, you know, the sign bylaw, what does that look like? And that's happening right now in hopes to launch that, say, in the springtime for our members.
And
So-
those have all kind of stemmed out of this consultant.
It's interesting. There are kind of three things. There's the you know, our downtown study that the city did. We had a strategic plan that we just completed before
Okay.
Roger came in, and Roger's kind of consultant. So those three
Kinda
are
working
kind of
hand
our
in hand.
core. Yeah, and we have the BIA just had elections too. So we have a new board coming on board, and I was just putting together their, I'm using board a lot, but onboarding.
Right.
And those three studies are inside of that binder they're getting at their first
Wow.
meeting. So those three are kind of our key.
Going to shape
Yeah.
their lead.
Exactly, yeah.
So now we're talking about beautifying downtown, and that was something that we asked the Ward 2 candidates when we held our debates here was about the beautification of Bay Street and if they would support that. Now, from the Downtown Association's perspective, I'm assuming this is one of the priorities.
It's interesting, the downtown team, like Future SSM definitely identifies it. And,
Right.
and we think that anything that's like a capillary that goes to the association, anything that kind of connects the city's definition, water to rail,
Right.
you know, say Bush Plain or Bellevue to the Mill Market, anything that kind of connects my members to that, and we can have initiatives that kind of work together is always a positive. That being said, my memberships for the BIA is only Queen Street, Pym to Dennis.
It's a small kind of.
Yeah, so they're interested. We've had, you know, the city's engineering has run public forums and things along those lines, but it's kind of just a little outside of
Beyond
our
the
scope.
scope.
Yeah, but we're definitely interested, and like I said, the city has definitely run open houses with our membership as well. We've done public surveys in regards to that.
So something more within your scope would probably be the question of whether to two-lane Queen Street.
Absolutely.
And is this kind of a topic of debate amongst the membership, or is there a consensus one way or the other?
That's a really interesting question. We just had our final board meeting with the old board
Right.
last month, and we said it was, a few months ago, we said it was adamant that we have two-way traffic, and now we're saying maybe that's not the answer. Maybe the answer is focusing strongly on other aspects that will divert traffic correctly onto Queen Street two-way. Luke
Okay.
Dufour mentioned, you know, in one of the debates, the Strive debate, that if we were starting from the ground up, definitely do two-way.
Right.
But we have what we have right now, so we have to think smart.
Work with what we have.
Exactly. So, you know, we're working on wayfinding as a city right now. So if the wayfinding strategy identifies the fact that people get off the bridge and they need to find a way to kind of like our cultural, urban, downtown core,
And it calls for that.
then maybe we can answer those questions with the correct signage, and maybe it's not, you know, a
Necessarily.
conversion.
So there's not a clear one way or the other right now. It's kind of
No,
Depending
I'd
on-
love to tell you, but
Yeah.
no, it's
It's a-
we've surveyed our members and it's not clear.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's okay. It'll all come out eventually, right? It is kind of a topic where there's these two sides, and they both have valid points. So.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to take a short break, and then we will be back here in the studio with Josh Ingram talking a little bit about downtown and the municipal election. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Civic Affairs, here with Josh Ingram. Now, something, and it's funny, I just spoke with Mayor Provenzano earlier on the episode about taxes, but being the general manager of the Downtown Association, from your membership, have you heard a lot of issues about taxes? And if so, what would you like to see the newly elected council do? Do you think that the city's taxes are deterring businesses from coming to the city, but specifically downtown, or what's the consensus coming out of this election for the Downtown Association?
Yeah, that's interesting. I hate to give you like the political answer, but I can tell you that with a new council and a new board, kind of identifying the direction will kind of be up to council, and we'll advocate for being a voice at the table, being
Right.
the voice in regards to solutions, but seeing the makeup and where they choose to kind of direct those conversations is important. That being said, I think our commercial tax needs to be evaluated for
Right.
sure. I think I'd be in favor for that, and in favor for a subcommittee or the actual budgetary committee to take a look at those things.
Right.
That being said, we are a board of council. It's kind of a little too early to tell. But my answer would be, if I could succinct it, is there should be a review.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And in the last 4 years specifically, and the answer to your question, it doesn't have to be directly related to issues with council, but what's been the biggest challenge with the Downtown Association, not even the Downtown Association, but with just generally with the downtown, and how are you hoping to address that moving forward?
Well, I'll give you a part answer and kind of part solution. Buy-in from the city has been historically an issue that we've struggled with. Getting the door open for council and for the city to hear the concerns of the association. Slightly before my time, before the interim board, we didn't even have a councillor who sat on our board.
Wow.
That's not correct.
Right.
As a board of council inside of the municipal act, we need a
A
councillor
voice at
sitting
the
at
table there.
But the interim board came on in 2016. We had a councillor. Things changed. We wrote a new policy. The new leadership of the city has dramatically changed that.
Right.
My board chair and the BIA advocated for having the BIA be a strong voice on the future SSM project for the downtown. The mayor and the deciding votes on that, brought me in as the chair and with a strong voice.
Right.
It's very easy to get on the phone with the councillor. The different departments have been very open to aiding where they can and taking criticism and augmenting where they can. So that relationship has gotten so much tighter even in the 2.5 years that I've been there. So I think that we are so aggressively farther with our city's relationship than we were.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So I need to give the last council and the mayor, accolades, the city staff. So really kind of having an ear to the downtown businesses, but I think that's, has gone so far compared to where it was 4 years ago.
Kind of keeping that relationship in the progressive
We have to
manner that
keep
it's been
moving forward. Yeah.
Well, no, I think it's great to hear that, council, that there is an ear to the businesses downtown, because they do make up a huge part of our culture as a city. Now, my final question for you, and just really quickly, what are your hopes moving forward? Just that this progressive relationship continues to move forward?
Oh,
You have to summarize it. I know
Man,
it's
that's
hard.
such a tough question. But yes, public spaces, public infrastructure is really high on our list. Beautification, the resurfacing of Bay Street, beautification features like benches and garbage cans and replacing the trees, like these are, wayfinding. These are all really big things on our list. And tackling things kind of systemically, kind of like in the micro and the macro, in the sense that like, here are little planters that we can put out that are a big win and an
contribute to the big
immediate.
picture.
But then here's something coming in like 4 years
Yeah.
that we're really swinging for the fences. So being able to tackle downtown kind of with those two lenses are really important. So I want to see tiny little wins progressively this year, but I just want to see something that blows the community out of the water too.
Well, it sounds like exciting things are happening.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and chat with us.
Thanks for having
And
me.
we will be back to close out the show with myself, Riley Smith, and Andy Martins just after this break. Stay tuned on Civic Affairs. Welcome back to Civic Affairs. We're here to close out the show this
We
evening.
are. It's a great fastest hour of television.
Yeah, it was fast. That was our first conversation with Rick Niro, with Christian Provenzano, and with Josh Ingram following the election. So it's good to hear kind of what's in store for the future, and some final thoughts, of course, on the last 4 years from those folks. Now,
Right. One more council meeting for this current council.
that's what I was going to say. So we have
Next
one more
Monday.
council meeting on Monday the 5th,
Right.
where I don't imagine that a lot will be happening. I think it'll be a lot of closing out of the old guard, and there were some folks who it'll be their last council meeting,
That's right.
period.
This council is there until November 30th, and then new council gets sworn in.
So if you have any pressing issues,
You gotta
until
get
the
'em done
30th,
now.
Yeah, you gotta grab them. But you know what? Luke Dufour told me that, and probably other councillors too, are already taking calls, the new council that will be
Right,
starting in December.
right.
So they're gung-ho to get started, and their first meeting is December 3rd or 5th, one of those two, whichever one's a Monday.
Third, yeah.
So
It's
that's-
just an
It's an
inaugural
inaugural meeting. It'll be very symbolic and ceremonial more than anything
Right.
else, but we can look forward to that. And then we'll be back on Civic Affairs. With some new guests
We will.
coming forward. We don't know who they are yet, but I'm sure that they'll keep us on our toes, the city staff
Exactly.
and the councillors. So stay tuned for next week's episode of Civic Affairs. Thanks for watching.
See you next time.